switching things.
Yes, I want to say
Are
that.
you guys able to
There we
hear me
go.
now?
Hopefully people can hear me now. My meter's bouncing at least. So,
Yeah, that's a good sign.
yeah.
So, you know, just as an example, this was probably the most extreme example, and I'm hearing people say, "There it is." So yeah, that where we really saw a trade-off going. Now, what does this tell me? I got to be honest, it doesn't tell me a lot. It tells me that I had a match and it started off and it held the audience for the first several minutes, and when my competition went to commercial break, we gained that audience and we kept that audience. So that to me is a very good story.
Yeah.
I like that story because it tells me that they didn't turn over, see what I was doing, and turn away. But it also means that I rented an NXT audience. And then if someone were to say, is there really that many people flipping channels back and forth? I would say, yeah. I just saw 180,000 people show up out of the blue the moment NXT went to commercial. And I don't think that's a complete coincidence.
And it's 20%. Is that an average sample in this quarter?
I think that was a little bit more extreme than normal. I wouldn't say normally I see quite that many people flipping, because part of the thing is NXT, when you look at their ratings, they tend to start strong and then kind of go down throughout the show. So I feel like the first quarter, you're going to see a much larger jump on commercial breaks versus the later quarters where it's the people who are invested in what that show is about. You know, I think in the first quarter, a lot of people are kind of sampling. And so in this case, they opened up with this segment that had Finn Balor and Pete Dunne and Damian Priest and Kyle O'Reilly and Scarlett all intermixed. And, you know, I actually think that's a decent number for them. It was really neck and neck when you really look at that overall viewership. The P18 to 49, that's not uncommon that AEW is almost doing twice what that number is, especially in recent quarters, recent weeks. But, you know, for overall viewership, I'm not going to say that was bad.
And do commercial breaks happen in the same minutes for either program? Is there a regular spot where, especially for me, I'm somebody who's obviously not getting the minute by minutes, but we do get the quarter hours. Those end up in the Observer. Are there particular quarters that are more likely to have a commercial break in them in a specific spot or something?
I would say, in general, you know, if you were to look at how the show looked as a whole this past week, you know, depending on how you want to code things, and you can code it a lot of different ways. But essentially, what I'm looking at here is, you know, on our 120-minute show, there's probably about 90 minutes of wrestling, of wrestling content. So 90 minutes of show. About, for us, 16 minutes of what I would call a traditional commercial break and 14 minutes of picture-in-picture. Now, half minutes and things like that might really be affecting these numbers. When I look at NXT, they went a little bit heavier on traditional commercial breaks and less on picture-in-picture, unless I coded it wrong. Maybe I did. Most weeks, it's not really this skewed. I would say, in general, in the first hour, you're going to have a certain number of commercial breaks. And in the second hour, you're going to have a certain number of commercial breaks. What happens is sometimes you're able to play with those kind of half-hour chunks and set a format up that says it's this many minutes, then a commercial break. I think each station kind of chooses their format of what they want to do. There is a general kind of flow to things, but you always have some opportunities to kind of adjust a little bit here and a little bit there. But especially now that so many people are with COVID not live producing these shows, and there's less people kind of in the studios, it's much easier the less variety that you're kind of implementing to your show format. What is interesting is you will see there are times that AEW goes to commercial and NXT goes to commercial almost at exactly the same time. And I really feel like that just comes from the fact that both of us are looking at, you know, what the yellow here represents is basically when did we go to commercials? So this is AEW going to commercial. This is NXT going to a commercial. This is AEW going to commercial. This is NXT. And you'll see that they're happening in a similar cadence. You know, and there's even times where both shows are in commercials at the exact same time. And what's intriguing with that is you see far less decrease when that happens about the viewership at that time. Like, you know, the switching is much less when both shows are in commercial compared to the times where only one of them's in commercial. And you can see here at the very end, we both went to picture-in-picture at almost identical times at the end of the show. So is there a cadence? Yeah. I think in the Monday Night Wars days, people were a lot more gaming the system of, oh, we don't want to go to commercial till they go. I think now we're both producing a program that where, you know, you're trying to tell the right stories at the right time. and it doesn't make as much sense to really try to game the system as much as it does create content that people want. Additionally,
and it's up to the program. It's up to AEW and NXT. I guess you can speak for AEW though. Like, does AEW decide when they go to commercial, or does TNT?
I think we create a format for the show, and we try to adhere to the format of the show. Is probably the easiest way to put it.
But so you're organizing when we're gonna go to commercial at this point, and then at this point, and then at this point.
I would say I don't organize.
Well,
I would say that
but AEW does.
The people that produce the show,
yeah.
We create a script, and we want to then try to manage towards that time as much as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of that is that you want to make sure that you are able to give the network the right cues for when they can program their local ads, their national ads, their, it's an advertising model that needs to be able to fill certain time slots. And you want to be able to say to people, those ads are going to air at such and such time. And for that, the programmer, especially think about it if it's live, that they have to be kind of interjecting these commercials and going back and forth. And I'll tell you, doing picture in picture is incredibly complicated if you don't know exactly what time that would be happening. So you got to be really good at adhering it. I'm sure there's ways to make it much more flexible. And, I'm sure the way that football and all the other sports that have a lot less control over how long things are going to go operate, it's a little bit harder. Mm-hmm. But, the way we do it, certainly we really control that. We know in advance. And, let's be honest, not every week is live. This last week's show was an edited show.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we edit the shows, then we are able to very much, make sure that this match is going to fit before the break and this and that. But that's why there's so many headsets and communication going on between the people in the back and the coaches and Tony Khan and everyone else on our side.
Right.
And of course the director and the producer and everyone else about when we have to hit these time cues, and getting people used to that live TV time cues is really big versus on dark where, we have general ideas of how long we want matches to go, but we're not ever counting someone down saying you have 10 seconds, you have 8 seconds. I'll tell you the only time that is really, really stressful is the end of the show. Is, everything else, you always have a little bit of wiggle. But, when you get to the end of the show's got to go off the air at a certain time.
Yeah.
That is stressful, trying to get that. So, I think, I know this week in The Observer, Dave Meltzer was writing about, how the Sting segment did and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of give an example here. So we have Darby.
Do you know what minute that you appeared in this segment?
I do always know what minute it is. I heard I was on
Are you a draw?
This week. Am I a draw? I think so. I appear a lot during Sting segments, and
I saw someone in a white mask and a flat cap, and I knew instantly that I had to stay tuned.
I come during Jericho segments and Sting segments, so I think that works. So like, oh, look here. This is inheriting that audience from the end of that last match, and you see it's still pulling straight through. We do a commercial break at 8:18. Bam. It goes down. We come back from commercial, goes back up again. And you see during that short period of time there, what was interesting is we actually see our P18 to 49 viewership was higher than all NXT viewership for some of that Sting segment, which I always think is intriguing when you could have a subset of your group be bigger than the whole group. But you can see here, Sting comes out for his entrance. We hit 1.1 million. They start talking to each other, and by the end of it, they're up to 1.2 million.
Is it possible to zoom in? We have someone asking if we can increase the resolution, which I wonder if you just zoom in and maybe make this graph a little bit smaller so that the text is bigger, I think is what they're getting at. Because this might be hard for some people to see on a smaller screen.
Well, I think it might just be hard for some people to see emotionally.
We have some 20 or 30 people watching right now.
Wow, that's a lot of people. Yeah. A lot of people really care about these numbers.
Minute by minute ratings are a draw. Maybe we'll put this on other platforms though after the fact.
We'll see.
We'll shop it around.
But yeah, just to give an idea of just, the reason I wanted to have this talk is I think people are very dismissive of the idea that minute-to-minute ratings could mean anything. But I would always counter with the fact that I see such a strong correlation between when commercial breaks are happening, when big segments are happening, when segments are opening and closing, and the action that's happening in those segments, that it's really, really intriguing. Now, I would also say I don't believe in 1 minute quarters. I do not believe in 1 minute, ratings that you can then take and draw an inference about. Because I find even when I say commercial break started at 8:18, I might not see that slip in viewership till 8:19. So if you're talking about a 60-second segment, you're always going to have to be saying, well, what happened the minute before? What happened the minute after? Was it really a big difference? There are times that you're going to see things that do not appear to be draws or things that appear to be draws. And of course, in general, we're going to see, that we think things like when we put Sting on the screen, hey, it hit 1.2 million viewers. That seems like a pretty successful thing to me. What I would be challenged
and that's
by,
that 8:27 is about the time that Sting appears.
Well, Sting came out at 8:22.
Okay.
They talk to each other. 8:23, 8:24 is when they start talking. And then they get to that Darby Allin shot in the crowd at 8:26, and the segment ends at 8:27.
Right.
So I always look at it a lot of times from the start to the finish of the segment. Did I see it growing? Did I see it shrinking? And then on top of that, do I feel like, the audience was responding in some way? And then I can even drill a little bit more and say, great, what happened in the, the individual demos? Were the individual demos going up or not? So I can see, hey, looks like we gained, actually here, it looks like male viewers was very steady, but female viewers were very steady. M2 pluses went up almost 100,000, 170,000 in the course of 6 minutes or so.
And this is just male audience ages 2 and above and female audience ages 2 and above.
And then over here, I can see the male audience went from, a 400 to a 433. So, 8-10% increase. That seems like a real success to me when I'm seeing several demographics increasing at the same time simultaneously. Now, NXT, they probably had some bad timing on their part because NXT chose to go to a commercial from 8:22 to 8:26. So the very start of the Sting segment, they went to commercial and stayed in commercial for that whole time. So that 1.2 million, I wouldn't say it needs an asterisk to it, but I would say that it's really important to note it wasn't in a vacuum. It was against the end of another segment. And then they went to commercial, and then they gave kind of a big opportunity for people to switch channels. So, I'm not going to necessarily say that it's one single thing. And again, week over week over week, when you see the same trend, read into that. If you just have a 1 minute thing, I don't really know if it's relevant to always say, hey, this video did 1 million viewers, because the minute before, if they had 1 million viewers, they're probably going to have 1 million viewers the next minute.
Yeah.
Now, that's not me trying to bury or suggest anything. I just mean you should look at it as a longer term thing. This tag match is another good example of where
this is Q3, right?
Well, it's not the quarters. It's the
this is a 10-minute segment.
It's the segments for me. So
Gotcha.
This actually started at 8:29 and ended at 8:39. So this would be it was basically what would be part of Q3, but not the whole Q3. And you can see that dip in the middle there, which corresponds exactly with when NXT raised their viewership. And why did that happen? We did a picture-in-picture from 8:33 to 8:36.
And picture-in-picture does seem to be effective at maintaining an audience through a commercial break.
I think it's always different over time. I think it's effective in judicious chunks. Now, if I take out that picture-in-picture break, this is what the match looks like. And you're going to see that's a pretty flat-looking graph to me. It says we normalized a little bit, and we went to over 1 million viewers, but under 1.1 million viewers. And over the course of the entire match, it looks like it generally grew. And then if I were to look at what did NXT do during that time, and I see NXT also went to commercial, and that probably corresponds a little bit with where you see the drop in NXT viewership here.
And we're talking about a commercial break that did not have a picture-in-picture. Is that what this line graph is showing?
I'm just taking out those picture-in-picture minutes.
So part of the commercial break did not have picture-in-picture, and part of it did? Is that what you're saying?
No, okay. I'm just saying, if you look here, it goes 8:29, 30, 31, 32, and it suddenly jumps to 36, 37, 38, 39.
Okay.
So I erased the minutes 8:33 through 8:35
Got it.
to basically say, what does the match look like when it was on TV?
Got it. Okay.
And, you could even go as far as say, okay, let me turn off NXT's commercial break. Now this is the match just when both shows were not in commercial.
Right.
And what does that tell me? And so, what it says to me is you normalize here, people are going to say whether they want to watch it. And then did they stick with the match from the beginning to the end? They generally did.
Right.
If anything, we got a small rise. It doesn't tell me that someone is a draw or isn't a draw, but it does tell me that in general, I thought this match did well. This is a show. One of the reasons I'm sharing this with you is this data is really great for my propaganda to say this was a show where almost every segment did really well. So it's a good week to kind of just demonstrate this.
Right.
But
we have a question in the chat. I guess a little bit we can make this related to this, but someone is asking, what does a demo mean? By the way, we're looking at viewer counts here, right? You don't generally look at demos. We do have some demo ratings here, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I were to say here.
But the question is, what is a rating? What if somebody did a 0.4 rating in a demo, what does that mean? That means that you've got 0.4% of that demo's population watching your show. So if SmackDown, I think SmackDown last night did a 0.5 in the 18 to 49 demo, that means 0.5% of the national population between the ages of 18 to 49 were watching SmackDown last night.
So what you usually see is something like this, where it's going to say AEW did a 0.45 in the demo of P18 to 49.
Mm-hmm.
I'll zoom in more. Probably people are like, I can't see. So if I went to ShowBuzz Daily right now.
Right. And that's why we bring this up, because the numbers that are most public are the ShowBuzz Daily numbers, which, except for the total viewership, which we do get in a number, we do know the number of viewers who watched any of the ShowBuzz programs, but the demos we get in the form of ratings.
Yeah. So when you see that 0.45, I'm telling you that equaled for that night 584 viewers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if you did that ratio every single night, whether you would get that same result. I do feel like it's a little bit, it changes over time. I do think that there's sometimes that it's different. But basically for me, I prefer to convert it into an absolute number because it's much easier to kind of look at that graph. But if I were to put this as percentages, it would be the exact same thing with just a different scale.
Okay. So you're converting
what I will say is,
are you manually converting it?
No, I get both numbers.
Okay.
So you can see here that we get the average audience of 0.45. There's also something called the coverage rating. The coverage rating here of 0.72 would be the difference between 0.45 is less than half of 1% of all people between 18 and 49 in the US that have access to a television or whatever that number is calculated at is watching the show. However, 0.72 is the percentage of people that are watching this through that have access to cable programming and are watching it at that time, is my understanding.
Right. There's like a national rating, and that's either a percentage of the people in general or the people with homes, which I think were the people with a TV home, which is like 96% of the population has a TV in their home. And then there's the coverage rating, which is not everybody has access to TNT or to access the TV network. But they have a TV, but they couldn't actually watch the program if they wanted to.
Yeah, and you'll see here that it's 1.6 times bigger for this number than for that number. It's I would say this is saying to me that almost both stations have very similar coverage, which they do. But I think this is also saying that USA is slightly more homes than TNT, which I also think is true.
They're both in about 90 million homes. Would you say?
I think that number's gone down, but yeah.
Yeah.
So just
SmackDown, real quick. It did a 0.5 and a 0.6. 0.5 in hour 2 and 0.6 in hour 1 last night, just to be fair to SmackDown, according to ShowBuzz Daily.
Yeah, but that's also a very different percentage because that's on Fox. That's not on. Raw would be a better comparer.
Well, don't you think?
Situation.
Well, they're in a position to do better because they're in more homes. But
yes,
the denominator of their rating is the same because it's a national rating, right?
I would think it is.
Yeah, and that's why SmackDown almost every week does a higher total viewership than Raw does.
Yes, absolutely.
And part of the reason for that is probably because they're in more homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just give an example here of 10 versus Dustin Rhodes. You're going to see this looking like this was the best match on television, right? From the beginning of this to the end of this, it exploded. What a huge audience we had.
Dustin Rhodes, man.
At that same time, we're going to see, I see a big drop in that NXT number. And of course, when I look at it, what I see is the end of that match right before that was Ember Moon attacks Toni Storm, commercial break, and the commercial break was pretty much that entire segment. So this happened in a void. So this is another good example of something where A, it's short, so not a lot of time for people to make decisions, and B, it was during a commercial on NXT. So very good. I'm glad to see that coming out of a commercial break before this, that we regained an audience very quickly, and then on top of that, we gained a bigger audience once the NXT went to commercial. But again, you could read this and make the conclusion Cody Vance is the biggest star in the business.
Who's Cody
Preston
Vance?
Rhodes. Cody Vance is Preston Vance is 10.
Are we breaking that news here on this stream?
No. Okay. No, I think that was very well known because he competed on Dark under the name Preston Vance. Very early on. You're
not revealing people's identities. I'm not going to get complaints later, am I?
I'm fairly certain that most people know that Preston Vance is 10, but we'll Google it really quickly here. Who is Preston Vance? No, but it when you do pictures of it, it says AEW star 10 parentheses Preston Vance, and he used to wrestle under the name Cody Vance. So that's not me really breaking kayfabe, but you can see great lead in here for the audience, and then NXT basically comes out of their break, and at that exact moment, that's when we have the Shaq, Brandy, Tony Schiavone angle.
And the Shaq segment is the peak of the whole show?
I think technically we might have seen a higher peak for that Sting segment. I'll have to check here in a second.
As I monitor the social media activity around this very, very highly viewed stream, I think your boss has chimed in and corrected my tweet where I referred to you as an AEW employee and pointed out that you were in fact a vice president.
my boss, which boss is that?
Tony Khan.
Oh, Tony Khan chimed in about that. Well, yes. That is special.
Are you still the vice president of business strategy?
That is accurate.
Okay.
If you were to ask what is the highest point on this show, it happened at minute 26 and minute 28 of the AEW stream, which I believe, if I go back here to my key, minute 26 and minute 28 would be these two numbers right here, and that looks like that was the end of the Sting segment. So I would say the Sting segment probably was the absolute peak, but if you remember, that Sting segment had a growth throughout it versus this Shaq segment started with a really great inherited audience, and on top of that kept that audience, and in fact even grew that audience a little bit in some of the key demos. So really, really nice, numbers. But you can see here, we see that the male demo 140. Actually, that's probably the NXT number. Yeah.
So the Sting segments. We're talking about the segment, but didn't the Shaq segment have the highest individual minutes?
1177 was the highest for the Shaq segment. And the Sting segment, the highest 1 minute was 1201. So no, I would say that was incorrect.
Okay.
I would say that sometimes people look at graphs and they try to make conclusions really quickly, and they might not be looking at the raw data. I would also say that the margin of error between 1177 and 1201 in terms of absolute viewers is a very small margin, and it's difficult to say. In general, this is great. It's wonderful just to see numbers that are hovering so far above 1.1 million. And I think it's challenging to sometimes draw it and say, oh, what happened in this minute or that minute? There's always going to be some people that are flipping channels. I do think what we see when we look at kind of that, the arc of the whole show, let's say, I think I have a graph here where I show the arc of the whole show. Where we are right now is this segment right here, where we're at the very top of this Shaq Brandy and all that going on. In fact, yeah. So we also see that some in hour 2 did not necessarily peak as high as hour 1 did, which happens. There's going to be different competition on every hour. And for the audience that you're looking at, we're spending a lot of time looking at this top line. What advertisers and people really care about is this line, this is the story that the television people are looking at, where we take off those tops and we see, that we're much more floating in this 500, 600, 700 range. And certainly excited to see whenever we're above that 600,000.
So about advertising, can you tell us, like, with the picture-in-picture, does the picture-in-picture affect the ability to sell advertising? While it helps you maintain viewership, is there an offsetting factor there?
That's a complicated question because of all the things that go into advertising. I think in general, that's never going to be the number one thing that people are looking at for whether they want to advertise or not advertise on your show is, am I going to be in picture? Because even if they were, there'd be other ways that you could be making up that money to them through other shows that they're advertising on to give them the full thing. In general, in some ways, the picture-in-picture, you're actually delivering a larger audience for that viewership at that moment. Because, there's probably actually more eyeballs on something during picture-in-picture than there is when there's commercial. I've looked at the difference between the two. I'm not going to get into exactly what numbers I find. I would say the effectiveness of picture-in-picture is proven by the fact we do picture-in-picture. If it was ineffective, it is a cumbersome thing to do, and so we wouldn't do it unless it was worth doing.
Right. I guess advertisers don't feel like the viewers' vision from their message is being distracted by the picture-in-picture.
I think that you're always in communication with your advertisers. This is the PC answer that you're going to get is that if for some reason they had a problem with how they're being presented, they would let you know and we would adjust. I think there's a lot of different ways that people get integrated. And a lot of times you'll even see that sometimes those picture-in-picture people are also advertising in other ways on the show, like our fantastic sponsor, State Farm, who sponsored our recent last 2 weeks of shows. And you saw them on the aprons around the ring. You saw them getting mentions on the show. You saw them getting advertising on the graphics in the program. And then you might also see their advertisements during the breaks there. So advertising is a very... it's a larger tentacled beast than just a single, hey, I want to put my ad in a picture-in-picture break. It's a lot of different pieces going into that. And at the same time, one of the advantages of being on a television network is not having to individually program your ads. So somebody else is worrying about all that stuff a lot more than I am. What I'm responsible for is looking at this data, and what the creative team is responsible for is to try to present a program that is interesting enough that people are going to want to be tuning in and watching it. So in the end, you can worry about those business concerns a lot, but you can also find yourself sometimes trying to chase viewers rather than try to create the right product that you think the fans want, which is, I think, ultimately what we've been told to do. Create a product that people want to watch and then deliver it to them. And from there, advertisers will figure out that you're awesome and they'll come and find you. And that's really important to us.
Yeah.
Someone on the Twitch
there's some questions there.
Chat asked, do I know what the viewership would be for this show without commercial dips? Yes. If that's a question someone has, I guess I could figure that out really quickly.
Oh, wow. We're up to 85.
Yeah. Let's see here. I would say approximately, oh no, that's actually the whole show viewership. So if I just said TV minutes only, yeah, it's probably the easiest way to put it. And again, the point of this is not to just obsess over this week. It's more to just kind of talk about in general, what is the data we have and what could we do with it when we look at it more granular. So here's a good example. So they asked, what's the difference between with commercials, without commercials? So here, I would say, the number you saw on ShowBuzz Daily was 995,000 people. And then what I'd say is, if I only look at TV minutes of 90 minutes, it would be 1.03 million. So the minutes that there was no commercial breaks and there's no picture-in-picture, and me editing around that to say, in general, what is the 90 top rated minutes of 120?
Mm-hmm.
That's really what I'm saying here, is that because most of those lowest viewed minutes come during commercial breaks, but there is a little bit there where it's half in a commercial and half out. And I'm choosing to take that whole minute and count it as one of those two things, a very binary state. If I spent a ton of time, I could divide this into it and come up with something else. I mean, here, I'll give you an example of what this might look like.
So if a minute is half in a commercial and half out of a commercial, are you just taking, are you assigning it commercial or non-commercial based on what the majority of it is made up of, down to the seconds?
I do two things. I first of all, I do it that way. And then I go through and do a second pass where I actually look at what the viewership is. And to me, it does not make sense. You know, I try to apply some logic that says basically if the viewership is sky high and the number here says it was in a commercial, that probably means that it wasn't in commercial for this viewership capture of that second. That I might be a little delayed between when something changed on screen and when the update for the new Nielsen number minute by minute is. Mm-hmm. Again, we're looking at minute by minute. This is very granular data. And in general, I think it's more important to look at the trend of a 6-minute, 10-minute, 14-minute match or segment, and then make a claim on that rather than saying what happened at 8:26 versus 8:27, because there's no way to really know what's in people's head. So here, if I look at commercial breaks, you know, just for time it was off television, and why does that not add up to the right? Oh, because I chose the wrong two. There we go. Here we go. So this is for the 30 minutes that I was off. I was 891. For the 90 minutes I was on, I was 1,029,000. Similarly, we had about 534,000 watching during versions of commercial breaks. We had 600,000 watching during versions of the TV show. And you can see similar numbers for NXT. Mm-hmm. What I would say is interesting about it is, you know, sometimes the variation is lower. You know, for us, you could say there's almost 237,000, which let's see what that is equal to in terms of percentages. 13% drop when we go to commercial, 11% on the key demo, versus on NXT, their commercial time, ironically, this is kind of fascinating. Oh, this is because this is filtered on AEW's commercial time. So this actually would not be true for NXT. Those NXT numbers aren't accurate because this is just based on when was AEW in commercial.
Okay.
I would have to do it again with my NXT filter to answer the NXT question. But so, you know, their answer, the question they asked, what's the difference there? You know, it's 1/3 of the show is in commercial and 2/3 is not. That's probably the very easiest way to put it. And the difference is, you know, 100,000 people. In general here, you can see I dropped about 13%, but you saw that other swell one time was like 20%. Mm-hmm. So it's very different. I'll just kind of crash through a couple other promos. The Inner Circle promo, nice build from start to finish. Again, Chris Harrington cameo almost at this moment. I was actually cut out because I was adjusting my mask, as I recall, during singing Judas.
How does it feel to know that there are 1 million people watching you sing on live television? Well,
you feel really dumb.
Television. You feel dumb?
You feel really dumb about adjusting your mask constantly while you try to do it. But I will tell you the best part about singing on television when you're masked is that you don't have to know the words. You just have to gesticulate. Mm-hmm. Because so sometimes we'll be with people, they'll be like, I don't know all the words of Judas. Be like, doesn't matter. Just big actions, pretend you're rocking out. And of course, you know, when the fans are there, it's not that you're pretending to rock out. They're rocking out, and it is fun. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I will admit to not knowing all the words.
You just have to know that the chorus line, right?
Just chorus line, yeah. But, you know, really great build. And that's great because a long promo segment going over the commercial break, that key hour there, that's a time that you really want to make sure you're still capturing audience, you're still growing that audience. And conversely, NXT did the same thing. They went out of a picture-in-picture at about 8:57, and they stayed with their match. And they did this Ciampa versus Grimes match with Thatcher in the corner, which, you know, I'm sorry to say, Timothy Thatcher has not been put in a lot of great drawing segments on NXT television based on what I've seen. It seems like he keeps getting the short end of the stick, where it's Chris Jericho on AEW TV and it's Timothy Thatcher on NXT, and that's probably not going to be comparable for your casual fan.
So you think Timothy Thatcher has had sort of the bad luck of being head-to-head with some of the bigger stars in AEW?
I don't know what luck has to do with it. I'm just saying, if I look at what his performance is, I think sometimes they're low. But I also think that you should always be looking at what was on your competition at that time.
Are you tracking how particular wrestlers or personalities are affecting minute-by-minute ratings over time?
What do you mean by tracking?
Like, are you keeping record of a list of like over weeks and months of this is how Chris Jericho affects the ratings, this is how Orange Cassidy affects the ratings, and Moxley and so on? I mean, are you trying to figure out who's a draw?
The challenge you're always going to run into, as I avoid your question, is to say, what are we comparing it against? Because if one week someone comes out and 1.2 million is your very top, and then the next week someone comes out and the best any segment does in the whole show is 850,000, do I say that everybody on that 850,000 show was not a draw and everybody on the 1.2 million show was a draw? Mm-hmm. Or do I say it's relative to the average of the show and I'm looking at who did above average or below average? Well, that's also going to burn me, because I get to the main event of this show, and the main event of this show did not do as well as Sting and Shaq. And yet they did close to 1 million viewers, which in every other week we've had for months and months would be incredible. So again, it's relative towards what I'm looking at. So what I'm often trying to look at is kind of how did it do within the segment time it got, especially when I try to normalize for commercial breaks and competition commercial breaks and lead in and lead out and hour change. Was it good or bad? And I am looking for evidence that says, hey, something's here, or say, hey, something's not here. And there are going to be times that people pop, but it is very difficult to come up with a single metric that's going to capture everything that you need to know about what's happening in these matches by a single metric that's going to say, yes, this person's a draw or not a draw. Mm-hmm. I will say over time, when I do the list of how the segments perform 15, 20 weeks in a row, right, I see the same names often hitting places. And that's going to drive us oftentimes to rely on those people more and more.
Right. Chris Jericho does when you have it over many months or a year, AEW Dynamite's been on TV for over a year now, you have a lot of samples and a lot of opportunities to test.
Yeah. But I will say the election screwed everything up. Mm-hmm. Let's not in any way underplay how big the news shows were in this cycle here, and then how different it was at different times that we had sports on or not on. So when football came back and basketball and other things, they completely throw off what's happening in your calculations and your things. So the best I can ever do is kind of look at the show by itself and try to understand which segments seem like they worked and grew, which segments seem like they lost the audience, and then trying to understand as we reset through segments, what happens. I will say in general, we look for things like, hey, did we do a lot of promo segments and did they have a certain trend to them versus did the in-ring segments do well? And then try to structure a show where we learn something from that. Mm-hmm. I don't know yet if I could ever say this person is a guaranteed draw, and if I put them on, they're going to do better. But I will say in general, I do think that Chris Jericho is going to perform better than Preston Vance of the Dark Order. Mm-hmm. And he has proven that he's going to do that. But, this 1 week number, Preston Vance had a killer number, but I think it was distorted by the fact that NXT was in a commercial, and it was right before Shaq was on television. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I've figured out that magic formula yet. I do think it's really helpful over time to look at it and to understand it. And I'll tell you, guys get really obsessive about trying to understand this stuff. And I don't do it in a way that I want people to be obsessing about what they're doing. What I want people to be obsessing about is, are they presenting the best form of themselves on that screen?
And you're talking about performers.
Yeah. Is that there's so many, to me, it's a little bit of like hitting the lottery sometimes. There are certain segments that you're hitting the lottery and you're going to look good or look bad, and it's maybe not your fault. And so much of this, in my personal opinion, is driven by the fact that when your competition is going to commercial and you're going to commercial, different things happen. You know, if I look at the graph for the whole show, you know, what I'm going to keep seeing over and over again is they go up, we go down. We go up, they go down. And that to me is people correlating each other with when you know they're basically trading off.
Yeah. These curves that we're seeing here are all commercials, all these peaks and valleys that we're seeing.
Generally, yeah. I mean, every now and then you'll have a match that is so not enjoyed by the audience that it will go away. But that is, I don't think we had that this week. That's one of the reasons I chose this week to show you the data. Is it supports my narrative fully and is is absolutely cannot be challenged in any way because it's clearly the truth and only the truth and nothing but the truth.
So, can I ask you about quarter hours? Since we have quarter hours for every Wednesday night since October 2nd, 2019.
Okay.
And I have someone, Corey, who helps me find all the labels. We basically extract labels from the Observer as Dave publishes, you know, this is what this quarter did and so on. And we use that text to try to get an idea of, okay, well, this is what was in each quarter. And then what I do with that is I put all this in a spreadsheet, and I take each quarter and I say, all right, this is what the average quarter-to-quarter growth or loss is for this quarter, whether it's 1 through 8, if you follow me. And so I know that, like, so I don't even bother with Q1 because there's no growth there. It's the first quarter. And
which means everybody who's in Q1 ultimately already gets discounted in their value, right?
And it's also the most, it's often the most viewed quarter of either show.
It can be. I would say actually on NXT usually it is. On AEW usually one of our later quarters is the most viewed quarter.
And I think it's
usually
sort of like
grow the show by the end.
And I think it's like, well, it's sort of tainted in that it's getting a big lead in, perhaps not always, but often it's getting a big lead in that has nothing to do or has not much to do with the show. So and then we know that the top of the hour Q5 does well, and then often the main event does well. And then sort of all the quarters in between that, so 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, usually lose viewers. So I'll take the average of each quarter across all that time and say, all right, how much did this quarter, this individual data point, how much did this quarter gain or lose viewers, and how does that compare to the average? And then I say, so, okay, that's this is, I think I call it the adjusted Q to Q, P18 to 49 growth for this quarter. And then we try to match that up to names, knowing that there's hazards here, and to see if there's patterns. But we do end up, in the case of AEW, I see people like Jericho and Moxley top the list in terms of having the most positive effect.
So in the end, do you think you're getting valuable data out of all that?
If it's over a big enough time, I think with people who I have a lot of samples on, it's more meaningful, and with people who I have fewer samples on, it's less meaningful. So like Jake Roberts ends up being somebody who seems to be very positive, but he's only been in a handful of quarters where his name is mentioned. It's like it's not very perfect because we're relying on labels that contain text that may or may not mention everybody in the segment, you know. I think if it's someone who appears a lot, that's helpful. Yet on the other hand, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you put somebody on TV a lot, they end up becoming a bigger star and become better known to the audience.
Good way of looking at it. So let's. The one thing I would also caution a little bit is how often is there a commercial break in different quarters.
Ooh.
So you can see here that it's not always universally distributed. If I did this right, program name. See if I did this right or not. So this is telling me that in quarter one, I didn't have a single commercial break for AEW.
What is this ever or over what time?
Nope, just this past week.
Okay, got it.
But meanwhile, in NXT, they did a 3-minute commercial break.
Okay, these are minutes. Okay.
Yeah, and you can see that they kind of distributed their commercial breaks pretty evenly between all the quarters, versus AEW looks like it's a little lumpier.
Yeah.
3 minutes here, 6 minutes here, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 7 minutes, 5 minutes.
And then they go commercial free for the last half hour. Well, the last 15 minutes and then overrun.
It looks like they did a picture-in-picture for 2 minutes.
I see.
And it looks like AEW did 3 minutes of picture-in-picture.
Got it.
So very, very similar. So one thing I would just say is, quarter over quarter, you would also have to feel very confident that you're not adding in commercial break minutes. And so as much of a hassle as it is, normalizing for commercial break minutes might actually make a little bit of a difference there when you're looking at those quarters by quarters.
Right.
The other thing is not every segment is evenly divided into the quarters that you look at. I think I saw on your thing that Inner Circle was being credited as 9 o'clock onwards. Mm-hmm. But if you look here carefully, Inner Circle started at 8:55 and ended at 9:04. Right. So it really was one half in quarter 4 and one half in quarter 5.
Yeah, a lot of segments overlap multiple quarters. Yeah.
And so that's the other challenge that is really, really difficult to kind of do. You can see the Abaddon match, very flat, very up, over 1 million viewers. Real happy with that. You can see the Omega promo goes up and goes down, but at the same time there, why does it go down at 9:33? I don't think it has to do with the fact that Omega got on the microphone. I think it has to do with the fact that at 8:32, that's when NXT came back from commercial.
So we just saw the Abaddon match maintained its audience.
The 70 seconds of the Abaddon match maintained its audience.
Yes. Okay.
Which to me tells me nothing at all, because it's 70 seconds and it had a good lead in with the end of the Lucha Brothers matches we see going up a lot. This was a match that had 2 different breaks, the match before it, where a picture-in-picture up there and then another one here. Again, if I take out all those breaks and I look at the show at that match, I see a normalization, and then I see, a rather flat with a build towards the end. Mm-hmm. So to me, this was not a week where I saw people tuning in or tuning out for matches as much as I have in some other weeks, where things would go long and they'd grow a lot, or things would go long and they'd shrink a lot. I don't see any of that. So this was a week where people really seemed generally interested in what the matches were. But again, here, the reason I think that 9:29 through 9:32 was going up here is NXT was in commercial break for some of this. Plus, I think there was some legitimate interest in what is Kenny going to do, and we're coming off of a commercial break. So we had to gain audience very quickly because we had to get back to our kind of pre-commercial number. And then on top of that, NXT was in a commercial, so then you're getting more people fed over from NXT. NXT leaves commercial, and our number goes down a little bit, but then stays very strong at 1 million viewers. And so I wouldn't, I don't take that and read into it and say, oh, look, talking was bad or good for him. I look at that and say, wow, 1 million viewers looks like it was very steady. I can explain why there was a dip in this graph, why there was a bend there. So it's not something where I would get really obsessive about it and try to read into we should do more of this or less of this. Ultimately, creatively, do what's right. And then the bigger choice would be, maybe you don't give it 10 minutes, maybe you give it 7 minutes, maybe you give it 15 minutes. You can adjust your creative vision to fit a little bit better when you make a learning from that.
Yeah.
But in general, it seemed to work well. Now, same thing with this MJF versus Orange Cassidy match. You can see here that the beginning of the match really isn't until 9:45, and the end of the match is 9:58. And I actually see a very nice build during that time. And like I mentioned earlier on in this chat, from 9:49 to 9:52, we were in commercial break, or actually in a picture-in-picture, and NXT was in commercial break with their Gonzalez versus Ember Moon match. And I see, if I take that out, so let me, again, I'll filter out the minutes that we were in break and we were in picture-in-picture, and look at that match. And now I think I have a really clean story about what happened during that match, which says to me, the two guys started wrestling, that match continued on, and in the last 5 minutes of the match, we saw a significant swell. And maybe that's people who have been programmed from the Raws and SmackDowns and the things of this world to say the last 5 minutes of that TV show, something exciting is going to happen. So I'm going to tune out of this show and I'm going to flip over to wrestling and see what happened. Maybe I'm seeing people say, hey, I'm not as interested in what's happening on the other show. Because I can also see here that NXT doesn't look like it maintained its audience for those last 5 minutes.
And it corresponds with some growth in the AEW viewership.
And so, there are some more sophisticated metrics you can do where you can actually look at the trade-off. What I will say is a lot of times when we say, what happened to our audience? We'll find that it didn't bifurcate, it quadruplicated. It went to Real Housewives. It went to The Challenge. It went to Masked Singer. It went to news shows. It went to Hannity. Went to this. It went to that. I know you did some metrics just this past week where you were looking at NBA basketball and other basketball and try to see how much does that interfere.
Yeah.
I have not found that AEW's audiences and NXT's audiences identically react.
You're talking about to other programming.
To other programming or other news, you know, like the debates when they're up against wrestling. Yeah. I sometimes find that AEW seems like it gets hurt more than NXT does. But again, is that a narrative I create for myself to make myself feel good, or is that truth? I don't know, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I guess we found that we were just looking at ESPN games, NBA games on ESPN, and found that there's probably about a dozen samples where there does seem to be like a small negative effect to AEW and like a small positive effect to NXT, which I think is the NXT effect probably meaningless, and the negative effect for AEW was a little bit bigger than the positive effect was positive.
Yeah. I mean, a good example of what happens at the end of the show is one of my favorite things, which is where someone goes into overrun. And what you can see then is the jump of what happens during the minute or two where AEW has gone off television, NXT continues to be on television, and how many people they get extra from that moment. Because again, I would make a pretty strong argument that those are people that are either one, tuning in because they really want to see whatever show comes right after wrestling and they're just tuning in early, or two, those are wrestling viewers that are flipping channels over.
So NXT was on by itself for 1 minute at the end of
they had
hour.
About 1 minute extra overrun, and you can see here they got about 70,000 viewers on their P2 Plus, and they got about 30,000 viewers in their P18 to 49 in that extra minute compared to where they had been. But to me, this was a good story for our main event. I like to see it build from the start to the finish, and I was also happy to see that even though both things were doing something in the last 5 minutes, it looks like some people were paying attention to us. You know, the calculation of what does that 1 or 2 extra minutes do to your full number is usually very small. Every now and then, you know, there have been weeks where head to head over the 120 minutes, AEW might have won the total viewership, but they lost in the viewership plus overrun. And, you know, it's great for a narrative story, but ultimately, if you're fighting over trying to win by an overrun number, I think sometimes you're just trying to control a different narrative. And to be honest, the narrative that, you know, is really important is this narrative. What happens with your viewership in the P18 to 49 demo? Whoops, I pulled up the wrong one too.
The dashed lines are NXT and the solid lines are AEW, right?
Yeah, this is the discussion that, you know, this to me is the discussion, is about where are you in that P18 to 49, specifically because that's your younger audience. That's the audience that you're going to build in the future. And I will say, you know, what made me really happy to see is stuff like, you know, for the Cody Sting Darby thing, you know, I see Sting on screen and I see that P18 to 49 number going up. And that says to me that Sting is resonating even with people under the age of 50. My analogy I gave is people know who Michael Jordan is, even if Michael Jordan wasn't around in their lives in the last 15 years as a basketball player. And I feel like the big stars like Sting are going to be like that, where they're going to resonate in a way that Undertaker or other people are going to resonate, in that you know who the legends are in your sport. And they're going to even younger people that might not have even seen them on television before are going to know that they're relevant.
So I remember you teaching me sometime back in 2018, I think in Schaumburg, Illinois. You told me that there are 3 different types of information related to Wrestlenomics. Do you remember this conversation? That there's data.
I don't know what you're speaking of.
There's data, and that's just like data points in a spreadsheet. There's analysis. That's when you actually, I don't know, maybe try to make a graph or something like that. You could probably explain it better than I could. But then the third thing is, well, the analysis is like you say, okay, the data did this. This is what the data shows. But then the insight is where you explain why the data did what it did. So AEW Dynamite had a really good rating this past Wednesday. I think it's the highest key demo viewership since October 2019. The highest total audience. If you discount that 4-week run where NXT and AEW weren't head to head, I think it's the highest total viewership with that exception since October 2019. So why did AEW, with your insight, do so well this week?
Well, you know what I say to you always in these situations, Brandon. What do you think? Why do you think?
I think there were many factors, including Sting, including the buzz story about Kenny Omega being on Impact and people tuning in to see what was going to happen next as far as that goes. I think
it's undeniable that Impact ratings were up this week. And the only factor that appears to be correlated with what would be the difference between other weeks of Impact was the involvement of the AEW storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would suggest to me that you do have a group of people that are tuned in and are interested in what's happening with this storyline. And possibly some of those are new viewers to AEW that haven't been necessarily watching week to week, but are hearing that something big's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sting was an enormous part of this because last week's numbers when Sting came out, it was big. But what was far bigger was the reaction I felt internally. I got emails from every corner of the globe, from every person I've talked to in the last year and a half.
Were we talking about business partner people?
Everything under the sun. Everybody reached out to mention Sting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me really just means that it broke through that barrier and it was big.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't advertise Sting was going to be there last week. We advertised Winter is Coming. We advertised it was a big deal. And I'm talking about 2 weeks ago when Sting debuted.
Okay.
We advertised that it was going to be a big week. And we said, we're going to give you the best match. We're going to give you a pay-per-view, a Tokyo Dome main event match, Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega. We're going to give that to you on live television. And so we pushed that as a big deal.
Right.
And so people tuned in to watch that show, but they weren't necessarily knowing Sting was going to come.
Right.
We then this week told people Sting was there last week.
Mm-hmm.
Kenny Omega won the title. Big stuff is happening. And we saw our numbers seem to reflect for us right now a different level of interest in what we're doing in the moment of when the show starts.
Are you surprised that this week did better than the Winter is Coming week? I was surprised. I didn't expect that.
I would have to look at the competition again from last week to see what things we were competing with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mildly surprised because it was I'm mildly surprised because last week was a special, this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
I think what surprised me more was just how consistent the show was this week. Sometimes you see kind of peaks and valleys. And I thought, once Sting had appeared and Shaq had appeared, we might not have as strong of an end of the show.
And you're advertising Shaq as well, we should note.
We did a late advertisement on Shaq. I don't think that was in the early teasers of what we did, but then later on we made a big push to make it clear that we had an interview with Shaq that was going to be happening.
Was that mostly an online push, or was that there's some TV advertising for that?
I don't remember whether or not it made the topical on television or not. I couldn't tell you. So I think honestly, and this is something that I've seen a lot, is that the tail is oftentimes larger than the dinosaur. Meaning that you see the end, you see the reaction to what happened the week before in the next week's ratings. Is a lot of times we'll put on what we consider an incredible show and the ratings are so-so. And then the next week, the ratings will be up a little bit. And I almost want to say it feels that because we do know that we have, I think Dave Meltzer has said the numbers, and I think it's about 20 to 30%, closer to 30% of DVR viewership. So every time you see that number for what we do on total viewership, add 30% to it. And that's the number of people within a week that watch that show.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at something like Raw or SmackDown, that number is much lower. I think it's closer to 20%. And the big difference there, I personally believe, is that there's such a big crossover between NXT and on AEW fans that they're not able to watch both shows on the same night, that both AEW and NXT see a boost of about 30% of people who are coming back to watch that show later, versus Raw and SmackDown, which are the people that are watching it later aren't necessarily watching other wrestling programs.
Yeah, there's not a wrestling show running head to head that they have to catch up on.
It doesn't appear to be the reason that those numbers are higher or lower. So I feel that to me says a lot about the late views for your show, and that can compound itself. Because if I know 30% of my audience in the end is out there that hasn't even yet started the episode by the time I go off the air,
mm-hmm.
that means that I can influence those people to tune in the next week if I have a good show. So if I have a good show, I can drive those people to watch my show the following week. And a lot of times, if you create urgency, if you create something that makes it seem like it matters, and it's more important that they see it live than they see it on delay and wait to hear what the critics thought of it, that you're going to get better viewership live for those shows. And so I think that that's that element with Sting, which is, you know, you shock people into being like, oh my God, I didn't expect to see that. And the surprise of it kind of drives people for the urgency of they want to see what's happening with the show. I think that's a general technique that you can't obviously hot shot every single week, but if you know you can grab people's attentions and kind of get them to get second guess all the time, gosh, what's coming up next on the show? That's going to be exciting. And you see that with how you debut new people. I also will say that, you know, when I spent a lot of time looking at the NXT numbers, that I do think that there's some things they've done really successfully. You know, the thing that jumps out most to me when I look at the NXT numbers is I think they've done really successful things with their women. And sometimes some of their segments that they've done with like the women's ladder match or the women's in singles matches, they've done really well with that. And
yeah, I in my quarter hour analysis, I see like Io Shirai seems to do well.
Yeah. So it's exciting to me that I can, you know, even without digging into NXT's numbers, when you spend a little time kind of looking at the numbers and looking at the commercial breaks and whatnot, you start to notice the patterns of what's happening. And to me, it's like learning a language. It's repetition that helps you get a better gut feeling for how segments do. Yeah. But, you know, this is data and it's something to study. But at the same time, if you were to write a book based on what a robot told you, it's probably not going to be a great book. So it's always got to have that creative element. It's always got to have those things that you can learn. And if you do what you always do, you'll get what you did. Mm-hmm. So if you always program the same formulas, you can't really be that surprised that certain segments are up or down. So you have to mix it up on occasion. Mm-hmm. And that's what my Apple II is over here for, is I run a random number generator and that decides who gets to be on the show.
Is that a word processor to your left there?
No, that's my Apple II.
That is the Apple II.
That's my Apple II.
This is how you do all your analysis?
No, not anymore. Not anymore. In high school, I did. Really? I ran my statistics class off my Apple II because I lost my graphing calculator.
Someone is asking, is the spreadsheet available anywhere? Are you going to share this with the masses?
I'll talk about the walnuts. They asked about, is this coal?
Is that coal?
These are not coal. These are walnuts. You heard the story, right? I think it was on my Twitter. I went to drop off one of my dogs at dog care, and I could not shift from neutral to park, and my car got stuck in kind of this mid shift, and I had to turn off my car.
Why were you in neutral? Do you have a stick shift?
No, I was just parking. So I was trying to shift.
Oh, I see. Okay.
From drive to park, and it got stuck, and then it wouldn't let me turn the car back on because it wasn't fully in park. Mm-hmm. So I called a tow truck. When we opened up my hood was filled with pounds and pounds of walnuts that squirrels had individually gone under my hood, gone inside of the hood, and dropped it in the engine. And so the whole hood just was filled with all these walnuts that I took out of there. And so we just started.
Those were their walnuts, not your walnuts.
They were their walnuts.
Wow.
And they had in fact lodged in the shift such that I couldn't get it physically to shift anymore. So we pulled them all out and I was able to shift just fine. So this is my collection of all the walnuts.
Were you parked for a long time without driving?
I was parked for a pretty good amount of time because we had the pay-per-view loop. So from like November 1st to November 11th or 12th, I was down in Jacksonville, Florida for Dynamite, then the pay-per-view, then another Dynamite, and then it was also my wife's birthday, and so we took a trip and did lots of stuff. So it was a very complicated time. So I left my car there for a while, and then in general, we usually use my wife's car for most of the trips, and so my car sits outside this black walnut tree we have, and the dogs have terrified the squirrels so much that the squirrels just filled up the whole hood with it. So I was most surprised to show up at work this week, and someone had taken a stuffed squirrel and put it on my desk down in Jacksonville.
I missed this tweet. Yeah.
So that is what that is.
Mm-hmm. What else do you do for AEW? Do you just look at Excel spreadsheets all day, or do you do other things in addition to that?
What do you think I do, Brandon?
I think you do a lot of things. I think you probably talk to TV people and make TV deals, maybe. And I think you set up COVID testing, and I think you deal with some talent relations things.
And it's really I don't want to turn this into a podcast about what I do in AEW. I'm business strategy. I worked with Tony from the very beginning of setting up this company, and that just means anytime we have business deals, I spend a little bit of time kind of looking at it, and I work very closely with our legal team. And because of COVID, we've had to develop a whole lot of new procedures in order for us to be able to continue to run safely. Mm-hmm. And so I spend a lot of time on that just because we're a very lean organization. So I'm not going to hire a lot of people to, come and do tasks that if other people can come and do them, I can do them. So I work a lot with the team and do that. In general, it evolves. The EVPs do so much stuff when it comes to talent relations and writing the show and talking to media and, kind of developing the business. There's just also a lot of other things that have to get done too. And so I work a lot with that and things I'm passionate about, ratings I'm passionate about, international television deals I'm really passionate about, trying to come up with new revenue sources. Studying WWE was a very good education for me to think about all the different ways you can monetize your product. Yeah. And then, thinking about what the future holds. But it's everything from that. And I work and travel a lot. So it's not glamorous. It's part of the job.
I'm really hoping that we can turn in like the MP3 files for all of our earlier episodes of Wrestlenomics Radio into like the Phoenix University, online university or something. So we can get some sort of accreditation.
Get accreditation. Yes. What's the point? What would it mean if you had a PhD in Wrestlenomics?
In Wrestlenomics,
pride. I don't know. It can lead you down some pretty prideful paths that are wrong too. So but it was fun. Anyways, I just wanted to. I know people obliquely talk about minute by minute numbers or quarter hour numbers, and I just wanted to kind of try to almost show how dirty and messy it all is, and how difficult it is to kind of make meaningful conclusions on things. This week is not actually a great week to show that data because it doesn't really show the winners, the losers, the takeaways. This was a week where I'd be like, wow, great, do that again. It's kind of the conclusion, but it's fun. It's really interesting to see it that at that level. But at the same time, people are train crashes also draw viewers. I remember when people were complaining about the Dark Order angle that was run at the end of December in 2019 in Corpus Christi. And what people don't remember is that even though everyone online complained about it, viewership went up during that segment. And so, viewers going up doesn't always mean that it's critically acclaimed and people think it's the right choice in the end. Yeah. It just means that more people might have tuned in during that.
Yeah, I think it doesn't mean necessarily that people, if a lot of people watch a thing, does that mean that they're going to necessarily tune in next week,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is people might watch it and then say, I have no interest in that. Yeah. I start a lot of TV shows where I watch one or two episodes and I'll watch that episode to the end. Yeah. And then I'll just have no interest in watching the next episode. Yeah. Is that I don't feel fulfilled. And I do feel like there's a fulfillment clause that you need to hit.
But like I could watch a segment of some wrestling show and there may be a heavily hyped match, does a big number, people are unsatisfied with it for whatever reason, and then don't watch next week because they were unsatisfied, Yeah. And you can tell yourself a story that it was successful.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to be telling yourself a story, and I think if you're a very creative type, you have to believe in yourself as well in what you're doing. You can't let everyone else kind of drive you to the conclusions every single week. And there's more metrics than just TV viewership. There's merchandise numbers. There's pay-per-view numbers, there's online engagement numbers, and
which you'll be showing us the spreadsheets for next, right?
Oh, who knows? And there's social media, type information. And so you can see certain things where you might say somebody's value is in greater than small parts. Yeah. And you also see people have, I will also argue that diversity and representation matters, and that's an important part too, is that you have to educate your audience, and you have to also be able to put things out there that are going to appeal to the audience, appeal to advertisers, appeal to your network, and appeal to the creative minds there to say, hey, look at these people that you might not have seen historically, and look what they're able to do, and engage people different ways. There's a woman who works at the stadium that the arena we perform at. And
Daly's
her
place?
little sister comes to the shows. And she said she became a fan of AEW, not because we were there in Jacksonville, but because she started watching Sammy's vlogs. And she found Sammy to be so entertaining every week that she got interested in AEW, and now she watches AEW every week. And to me, that was a really interesting story to be like, oh, Sammy's vlog is not about him wrestling. Sammy's vlog is about the personality of Sammy Guevara and these silly little skits and this and that. But it engaged her enough to start watching, and she's a young female, 18 to 34 female. And that's, that's just how things are. That it's going to transform at different times, that you're going to reach people different ways. And so that tells you a lot about your value of being able to find different voices and different ways to reach people. And that's not always going to be captured in the viewership numbers, but it's going to be captured in other stuff.
Someone asks a question in here. I'm not finding it, but it's roughly, do you look at the YouTube view numbers for matches? Are you comparing that? Do you see a correlation between something that does well on TV? Does it do well in a YouTube view? The Sting video did really well, right? On YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. When we put up certain match things, John Moxley does great on YouTube. That's if you look at even the dark matches, where the highest rated dark episodes, John Moxley matches are the correlation of that. Everything else is mostly just how many minutes long was dark, and the views are somewhat correlated to that. But John Moxley matches is a good example of someone who just jumps off the screen whenever he's on those things.
Yeah. Last I looked, he's the highest in AEW for web searches, so that would seem to line up.
We definitely do look at that stuff, but in the end, you're telling stories, and so you don't want the effect of just kind of cramming people into stories just because they're popular or unpopular. You want to give people meaningful stories that are interesting to do, and people have a lot of direction in themselves. Chris Jericho wasn't programmed with Orange Cassidy because we thought that was going to be the best for merchandise. They were programmed together because they wanted to work together. And we thought there'd be some value there, and we thought creatively it would be a fun story, and we thought our audience would enjoy it. So, but on the flip side, was I upset that two guys that are great at moving merchandise were working together? I thought it was great. So, and it was the same thing. I thought it would do great on YouTube. I thought it would do great on that, and it did. But, you're always looking for things that are outside the norm, for sure, about when a clip takes off. And then you're also always afraid of kind of the Kavita Debbie effect, right? Of what if a clip happens to get picked up? The number one clip on AEW of all time. Do you know what it is?
No, but what is it? Probably won't surprise me. I'll say, oh yeah,
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's called like when Cody met the real Orange Cassidy.
Oh, really? Okay.
And what it is it's a little kid dressed up as Orange Cassidy after a show. And absolutely, it's a really cute video. And Cody brings him in the ring. And it's, most popular. AEW exclusive, Cody versus Orange Cassidy, 10/16. And has 24 million views. And it's this little kid.
24 million. Wow.
Yes, 24 million views. And so, that to me, that's, I don't know what drives this many views of it, except, and I can't say, every week we should book Cody versus a small child, but I will say this clip just continues to produce and produce and produce. And even months later, it's still like will be the number one clip every week of new views. And so to me, that's the Kavita Devi effect, which is somehow it gets into other search algorithms or other things, and it becomes a big clip in the same way that Kavita Devi in the Mae Young Classic or whatever is like the number one clip on WWE, and you'd be like, why is
it's one of them? It's very high.
Same with the Great Khali's clip is one of the biggest ones, like Great Khali. It's just like it has to do with what aggregators happen to be picking up that thing and reposting it. So sometimes you also want to make sure you filter out things that might be, I won't call them false negatives, but aren't necessarily repeatable situations.
And you see a lot of positive metrics around Orange Cassidy, right?
I think he's been really successful. Yeah, I think what was something we were really proud of this week and I'll out him. Referee Bryce Remsburg just turned to me and he goes, "How exciting is it that the main event of our show is MJF versus Orange Cassidy on the same show that had Shaq and had Sting?" And he's like, that's big because these are homegrown stars. These are people that 2 years ago, no national wrestling fans knew. And now we're introducing them to people. Now, yes, indie fans have known these guys for years, but your average fan had never heard of Orange Cassidy or MJF 2 years ago. And we have, and I think the company is great that, you know, they put them on the spotlight. They gave them the main event. They put on a fun match, and that dastardly human being, MJF, nearly broke Orange's fingers, and somehow came away with the win. But you know, it leading to quite the 7-on-7 match next week, which will be quite fun for the people having to manually break out data when you're doing interactions. 7-on-7 match always ends up with so many, you know, A fought C and C fought G, and, you know, all those things. So many things in a single match.
So I guess I just have one more question. I don't know if you want to go through anything that might be in the chat, but when the ratings come out, they come out every Thursday afternoon, or when we look at the quarter hours, and people like me put the quarter hours in a column graph for all to see. What are some things that we should be mindful of when looking at whether it's the whole show's rating or whether it's the quarter hours? What do we get wrong, or what should we be mindful of when we're trying to draw conclusions or analyze them?
So I would flip this. First of all, I work for a company. I have a bias. I have an agenda. I have all these things. You're your own independent person. I've known you a long time, but you're your own person. You're welcome to make whatever conclusions you want. And the people should be allowed to say and read whatever they want. So I'm not going to tell you what you're doing wrong or right and say that the words wrong or right associated with it.
But I mean, like,
I will tell you as an analyst, as someone who used to do this, what I got wrong before I did this, and what I've learned now is the nuance. So that's where I would go with it, is to say, I'm going to just talk about myself, what I did when I was in that position before I was behind the curtain. I very much overemphasized what I thought I could learn about quarter hours. And I didn't understand, one, the interaction they had on commercial breaks, two, the interaction they had with other programming that week, and three, the ability to really isolate any one segment to what's happening in that quarter hour. Is that almost nothing goes 15 minutes. I mean, Moxley versus Kenny Omega went, 30 minutes or 40 minutes last week.
Yeah.
That's one of the few times I could say, okay, these two segments are owned by these two guys. They deserve credit for it. And, you know, I would try to do this with Raw ratings, and I would have an enormous data set, and I'd still struggle to draw things out, because I think there are quarterly trends going up and down all the time. I think we love narratives that tell us this person's right, this person's wrong, and this is the conclusion.
This person's a draw. This person's not a draw.
Yeah. But it's to me, sometimes it's also just like, what are we saying about books or films? If you like a film and I don't like a film, does that mean the film is bad or good? Does it mean the film is successful or unsuccessful? You're applying a critical rating to something else. Now, can I say what the box office gross was? Sure. But I could also say, what was the marketing that went behind that box office gross, and what was the true inputs and the true outputs? I think in general, you know, what's really good to try to focus on is, compared to a week ago, what would that trend line look like? And then also recognizing that a lot of times, week over week, the show is programmed somewhat similar in terms of what kind of things fill segments, versus maybe not who's in those segments, but how long those opening segments and things are. You're going to see some trends that are very similar. So it might be helpful to you even look at things week over week, in terms of what the ratings kind of patterns look like, because I think that might also tell you a little bit more about what was different than a week ago. Yeah. And I would also identify things for first time and second time. So I have historically seen that if I put someone on screen twice, the second time they're on screen, they're less effective. In general, yeah, there are exceptions, but in general, the second time they're less effective. And so sometimes it might be interesting to note, hey, this is them again doing something. Did it seem like it's as much as the first time?
Which was not the case with Sting, though. Sting probably did even better than he did in his debut, although he wasn't advertised.
But not. I mean on the same show.
I see. Okay.
Like if you appear twice in hour one and hour two, you don't always have the same lift.
We've already seen you tonight. Yeah. Okay.
But, you know, everything has changed. The lack of live crowds means that we can do shows in the can with fake crowd noise, edit those shows, produce them, and in general, our edited shows are doing better ratings than our live shows, or about equal ratings.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, it was always, oh, spoilers will get out and this and that. And I think we're in a different era when it comes to some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I think that the way sports and television is being consumed, our audiences have changed a little bit of their expectations.
Were there spoilers out for this most recent episode? I didn't see them. I didn't like. I think I kind of vaguely knew. Oh yeah, this is a tape show, but I had not. I don't recall ever seeing like, oh, here's Dynamite spoilers to click on.
I don't think this past week there were spoilers, and I hope there's never spoilers.
But you have like a almost, at least for the pay-per-view, where there were like 1,000 people watching the show, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's live events too where we have audiences. Like on for Winners Coming, there was a live audience there.
Yeah.
So we often have live audiences, but I just mean, in general, I think the content carries itself, and I think we're in an interesting era where sometimes old rules of thumb that people in the industry will tell you aren't always applicable. Like they'll tell you, oh, you can't have a tape show, it's going to ruin your ratings, that or that. We do, it's fine. I think in some ways you can actually tighten up this show. I personally don't feel like the tape shows feel the same as the live shows, but I don't know if the audience can tell or can't tell.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever even seen a really conclusive piece of evidence about that. I know back in the day, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I recall there being someone pointing out that, hey, look, actually the taped episodes of Raw do better than the live episodes, which is probably just there's just no relation there.
There's a famous study that WCW did where they had people watch a show, and even though they told them like it was taped, they still thought it was live.
Right. I think I did like a Twitter poll. Like, when you were watching wrestling when you were a kid, did you think what you were watching was live? And like I think I did. Yeah, when I watched
I did.
WF on syndicated, Fox.
Flabbergasted. I remember being flabbergasted when
I think like most things were live. Like most things were non-scripted.
Like there was Raw spoilers once on the internet, and I was flabbergasted that what happened on Raw that night was the same as those spoilers, and I could not for the life of me understand how they possibly knew what was going to happen until later I realized they'd been double taping, and right. it was just very comical to me.
I thought American Gladiators was live, because why wouldn't it
be? Like they make those guys show up at Saturday at 2 p.m.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought I was looking at a window into the present reality.
Sure. Were you a big American Gladiators fan?
I think it was on as like WF Superstars in Buffalo was the lead-in for American Gladiators.
It was for us. Yeah, same thing in Rochester. Is right before they would say the following is paid programming, and I was always confused why wrestling came on when they told us it was paid programming.
Yeah, that might have been happening. I probably just didn't notice. I was 6 years old. So,
yeah, but yeah. All right. Well, this was fun. I hopefully have not spilled the beans in such a way that I get yelled at by the Bean Patrol.
The aggregators are out there scraping it up already, I'm sure.
Oh, well, I think the key
Chris Harrington says.
Yeah, well, yeah. Chris Harrington says a lot of things. Chris Harrington doesn't know what he's talking about. Maybe that should be underneath that should always be that quote. But I just wanted to show people kind of, I believe in the ratings because I see correlations between things that I would expect to be correlated. I see the stars getting big ratings. I see commercial breaks affecting each other's product. And I see tune in, tune out at the beginning and the end of shows, the beginning and the end of segments. And that's what makes me believe that minute by minutes matter. That said, if you don't believe in Nielsen ratings, you don't believe in Nielsen ratings, nothing's going to change your mind. I will say that we have some of this information, but it's hard to just quantify it into simple pluses and minuses and thumbs up and thumbs down. But, when you want to take the time to look at it piece by piece, it's great. The problem is you have to overlay it with stuff like what actually was happening every single minute of the show, which means you got to have a detailed list of that stuff. And that takes a while to compile for sure.
Okay. We've been talking for over an hour and a half. It's always great to have a Wrestlenomics reunion with Mookie.
Yeah.
I hope everybody learned. Go ahead.
What are people learning from your show right now? You said you have a new podcast up. What is it going to be about?
I think it just dropped. It is going to be about. There's some discussion about the NXT India story that I reported yesterday with John Pollock of Post Wrestling. There's some discussion of the AAA lawsuit between Lucha Libre FMV and Promociones Antonio Pena, which is the parent company of AAA. There's some interesting information in there about a number of $47.5 million that is maybe the amount of money that the entire lifetime of Lucha Underground got authorized from various parties. What else? There's a lot of viewership talk in addition to this. So, yeah, a lot of viewership talk.
Well, I hope people enjoy it, and of course, I hope people support the Patreon. That I don't get any cut of any of that money, so it all goes to Brandon and supports what Brandon and his team is doing.
You are yourself a $5 subscriber.
I am. I actually pay you. Pay you for the own thing,
and it goes into my PayPal. Well, I think I have a direct deposit now, but yes, it's all going to me.
Yeah,
Mookie has been scrubbed from the Patreon funding.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the Twitch here, and I realize since it's your Twitch, it's giant me and tiny you.
It is. I've been thinking about maybe doing something about that, but I don't want to break something. I'm no longer in the P18 to 34 demographic, and these things get harder.
Yeah. No, definitely. All of this is. I will plug one thing. I have a Twitch channel now, twitch.tv/Mookie Ghana, and I've been streaming probably once a week. Or at least twice a week, mainly me playing old video games like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I was thinking about playing Maniac Mansion. I played a brand new it was released today, December 12th, 2020, an Apple IIe game called Nox Arceus. That's been in the making for about 4 years. It's kind of an Ultima remake.
There we go.
On Apple II.
Wow, I'm going to back up. This is too close.
And I've been playing that, so you can follow me if anyone wants to support that. That's the one thing, of course, besides watching and tuning in AEW.
Are you monetizing your Twitch?
Oh, I have like 2 or 3 people at most that ever watch, so it's not a thing. And then I do play Among Us with the AEW crew: Colt Cabana, Leva, Brandon Cutler, and many of the other members of the AEW stars. Oftentimes we play and kill Allie over and over and over again. She screams "you." But so tomorrow I'll hopefully play with everybody. I always enjoy doing that. And so I'm learning a lot about the Twitch world, the Twitch ecosystem, as I would say in my analyst talks.
It took us a good 30 minutes to get this set up, by the way.
30 is a generously small number.
You think it was a lot longer?
Oh, there's a lot of different things, but we're here. It's good. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. Please support Wrestlenomics. Please support your local wrestling company. Support your favorite wrestlers, and if you enjoy wrestling, watch it. I know tonight I'll probably try to watch some Triple Mania, see what Mr. Omega is up to. I think he's got a big match.
Lucha FMV wants a cut of that, but you can follow Mookie at Mookie Ghana. You can follow Wrestlenomics at Wrestlenomics and me at Brandon Thurston, and that's all.
And I think we've probably we've quintupled the number of people following and subscribing to Wrestlenomics Twitch channel here in just one single stream.
Probably, but maybe we'll have a reunion again another day. So I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop the stream now. Bye.
Bye.